You're listening to Barbell Logic, brought to you by Barbell Logic Online Coaching, where each week we take a systematic walk through strength training and the refining power of voluntary hardship. You're listening to the Barbell Logic podcast. I'm Matt Reynolds. I'm here with a good friend, someone that you all know well, CJ Gotcher. Welcome to the show.
Ahoy. Glad to be here. Feel welcome.
Do I say your last name right at this point?
You
after
do. Yeah.
8 years.
I don't think I correct anybody, but no, Gotcher. Yeah, that's it.
Yes. It was Gotcher for the first 7 years, and then I realized eventually it was Gotcher and updated. So CJ is our Academy director. He has just crushed it at the Barbell Academy over the last several years. And we've done a lot of Q&As. I don't know how many we've done, starting with Scott and I several years ago. Nikki and I have done a bunch. Andrew's jumped in with us. And have you done any of these yet, Q&As?
Not here on the podcast, no. Just the one at the block party.
So we are going to do a Q&A specific for coaches. So we've kind of put out some feelers this past week on the social media and Slack and Facebook and whatnot, and wanted to just field questions for coaches, potential coaches, people thinking about coaching. So this is going to be more specific questions that people who are trying to coach or starting their career as coaches would like to have answered. And there are questions all over the board here, from people who haven't started and are looking to start to people who are relatively established. And so we're going to bounce around a little bit. We've got a 14 or 15 questions to get through, and we'll try to go back and forth between you and I. So let's roll.
Let's roll.
So question number one, I'm going to ask you the first one. This question is from Austin, who is one of our Academy students. And the question really concerns client relationships. This is a hard one, by the way. Like, talk about starting with a hard question, right? Question is, how do you know when you should fire a client? And the follow-up with it is, are there usually telltale signs that a coach/client relationship isn't going to be successful?
Yeah. So I was actually really excited when this one came through. I'm like, hey, that's a juicy one. Because like firing a client, when I hear that, I don't even like the sound of it. But we've all been there, with that client who it's just not going to work. For me, when I fire a client, there's a narrow set of situations when I would actually think firing. And that's when a client is like violating boundaries repeatedly.
Yep.
I can't remember where I've heard it from. It may be crucial accountability, but there's that 3-step process. First you let them know that this is not the way. Then you let them know the relationship is at risk. Then you let them know what the consequences are on the third, like, okay, this is it. Then, this happens, it's done. And in that case, I'm like, absolutely fire a client. Like, you set those boundaries for a reason. Most of the time when I hear, oh, should I fire this client? What I'm hearing is, I'm having a terrible time as a coach. I'm feeling a lot of resistance. I'm feeling, it's not working for me. And in that case, the coach-client relationship just isn't there. So half the time, I'm like, it's not like I'm firing them. It's not like they've done something wrong. I'm not a good fit for them. So
that's right.
Do I graduate them? They're moving beyond what I'm doing with a group coaching program. Do I refer them out to another coach? But it's some other means of saying, hey, your goal is still valid. Like, you're still a decent human being, whatever, but we're not going to be a good fit.
Yeah, I really like that. I want to always default to, what role do I play in this? Like, how could I have done this better, right? And that's not always the case, but like in any relationship that doesn't go great, I can't really control what the other person does. I can just control what I do. And so for the most part, for the vast majority of clients that have not worked out with me personally, it's not a them problem. It's either a me problem or it's an us. Like, our personalities don't mesh. And if you're out on an island as a coach all by yourself and you don't have anyone to refer those clients to, that's much more difficult. You actually are probably going to have to get into some awkward conversations, which will, by the way, make you better. Those crucial conversations that you have to be able to end that client-coach relationship. One of the things I love about Barbell Logic is that it's very rare that we fire a client anymore. As a matter of fact, we used to talk about this several years ago. We used to fire more clients because we had a lot less coaches. We didn't have a coach that could match with a client well. It's pretty rare, although it does happen, that you get someone who is just malevolent and just tough to deal with, right? And you wouldn't want to refer them to another coach because you don't want to ruin that coach's life. But most of the time, it's because you're not a good fit for them. And so if you've got a pool of other coaches that you work with or in a cohort or a community with you, that would, to me, once you go through that 3-step process of what you talked about, then the first step there of, i.e. the consequence, which maybe even shouldn't feel like a consequence, is just helping find someone who is a better fit for the client, right? For those of you who are listening to this and you're brand new coaches, you're 22 years old, or maybe you're 42 years old, but you're doing this brand new and you're doing it because you have to take the paycheck because you're trying to put food on the table. At some point, you still have to question, like, if you can't stand what you're doing, this isn't sustainable. And you go back to the way we train or the way we do nutrition, we are trying to build these lifelong habits that are sustainable, that are things that bring us an improvement to our quality of life. If the clients that you're training, if you have a client or two or three or whatever that are specifically making your quality of life worse, then something has to be done, right? Because then it's not sustainable.
I think that actually goes into that second half of the question, early telltale signs that the relationship isn't going to be successful. And you mentioned malevolent, which I thought it's such a good visual for the issue, because really, when I think boundaries, when I think malevolence, if I feel like I have to protect myself, or in your case, you have to protect your coaches, from a particular situation, that's not going to be successful. Like if I'm having to walk to the gym, I've heard stories from women coaches who like they feel like there's some creepy vibe, there's a sexual harassment potentially going on. Like,
sure,
hey, that's an early telltale sign. That's not going to be repaired. Probably.
That's right.
And if you feel a little bit of disgust, if you feel that, that I need to protect myself, that's a huge early telltale sign. I used to think like, oh, they think this, they do this, they keep asking the wrong questions. Like that's an early telltale sign. But the longer I coach, the more I get into situations where I early feel like I would never have a drink with this guy. Like this would never work out. And then 3 years down the line, they're just a fantastic client.
Yeah.
We still probably wouldn't have a drink together, like we don't match that way, but
sure,
they're still getting results and I'm still engaged in the process and loving it. So
yep.
Yeah, I look at big picture stuff. I look at the big blocks, the big boundary breaks for signs of failure, and the rest, a lot of that's negotiable.
Yeah, I agree. Cool. All right. Number 2.
Yeah. Well, this one's definitely for you. So this one came from David. So there's been a significant change of emphasis and approach since watching the first podcast. So he's been, a longtime listener. He'd love to hear from you how your coaching practice has changed and evolved over the last few years. Do you program differently now compared to 3 years ago? And what has kind of influenced that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think if you've listened, you've heard this change in us from strength at all costs to strength as an improvement in quality of life. The name of the company is Barbell Logic. We're never going to sell out on barbells. We're never going to sell it on strength. We are as pro strength and pro barbells as we have ever been. We are just not strength and barbells at all costs. We recognize that there are things that are important to people beyond that. And so for the vast majority of people, the vast majority of people, 99% plus of people, barbells and strength training will improve their quality of life, but we want to look at their goals and meet the clients where they are. We want to recognize that quality of life is the most important thing. If squatting hurts, like squatting legitimately hurts and makes your quality of life worse, then we don't have to squat. Like, do we want to squat? Of course. What percentage of our clients at Barbell Logic squat? Like, it's still like 99%, 98%. Guarantee you it's above 95%, right? So we're not trying to sell out there. I want to be very careful to make sure that the message doesn't get convoluted there. But we start to think about things like, and I tease this out a little bit, we're working really hard on a program that's coming called Before Barbells for people who are intimidated by barbells. Now, it's not called Barbell Logic's bodyweight program. It's called Before Barbells. The idea is barbells are coming, right? Like we're going to prepare them and build their confidence so that they can approach barbells in a way that they are not just physically ready, but mentally and emotionally ready as well. And then, of course, we program it. And we really have done this since the beginning. We've just been able to better communicate it in that minimum effective dose style. Like we knew that we weren't going from program to program. When a program stopped working, we just would go to a different template or a different program. That's really never been us, but we've been able to, with the help a lot of just walking through it on the podcast, starting with Scott and continuing to walk through that with the staff, with the academy. I don't know that there's been a major change there other than just helping really distill down our philosophy of programming. And then I think you also are going to start to see, and this is probably part of my life now as I start to get into my mid 40s of, I wouldn't call it after barbells because I love still lifted barbells, but I don't know if I would call it like more than barbells or barbells plus. I should probably copyright all those, trademark all those before I say them on the podcast. But, the idea is like, what happens for the people who have done this for 3, 5, 10, 15 years? and aren't really interested in, like, my best squat's 605 and my best deadlift is 725. And I don't know if I ever want to hit another 1 rep max PR. I want to continue to be strong, but I also want to be really healthy. And so I think understanding the client life cycle becomes really important, all the way from the person who really maybe isn't ready to do barbells yet. And that's maybe not physically, maybe it's mentally or emotionally or physically or all three, to the person who has actually walked through the fire of becoming stronger, to teaching coaches how to coach, right? Instead of just identifying coaches, but to actually walk through a process of helping to develop professional coaches as you do on a daily basis, to understanding how to meet clients where they are and try to help them achieve their goals. And if their goals aren't to hit PR squats and deadlifts, but to be able to be strong enough to do the mud run with their wife on the weekends or to keep up with their grandkids, then that's what we do. And so it's really just a lifestyle paradigm shift. It's not really, if you looked at the programming splits, like the Monday through Friday or Monday through Saturday weekly splits of my clients from 3 years ago to today, you would see very little change. It would actually look really similar. And to people who don't recognize the little tiny nuances of the change of those programs, they wouldn't notice it, but it's more in the paradigm shift in my head. So that's really what it's about. For me, it's not about strength at all costs. It's about quality of life first, and understanding that strength plays a huge role in there. So, yeah.
I dig it.
Okay. Question from Eric on credibility in coaching. He says, I've come around to the idea of meeting my clients where they are and giving them a mixture of some of what they want and most of what they need, even if it means doing things I wouldn't normally endorse doing, like maybe trap bar deadlift, leg press for otherwise healthy male. My question is needing to push back a function of my credibility or lack thereof, or is it really just hard with people who can be characterized as high on the neuroticism scale, or both? And so people come in and like, this is what I want to do. And you're trying to figure out, how much do I give them what they want to do versus what they need?
Yeah. So the way I kind of read this question, because the question wasn't, how do I get my client on board with what I want to do? Because that would be the wrong question.
Yeah.
I mean, the way Eric phrased it is the fact that I'm getting this pushback, is the fact that I'm getting this resistance a function of my lack of credibility. So to me, it's initially a trust issue. And I think it's important to recognize that there will always be a trust issue at some level, especially with a new client. I think we expect that when a person signs up with this, they've signed up because they're on board. We talked about this at the block party, but that when we look at behavior change, most people, when they're signing up, they're taking a first experimental step. They still have a lot of baggage around the strength training process, and they still hold you as a coach who they newly signed up with equal to other options. Like, they haven't bought in yet. So part of it is meeting them where they're at, enough to get them to buy in. And then later on, the more bought in they are, the more trust you have, the less pushback, the less resistance you get.
Yep.
As we're navigating that process, yes, it's going to be much higher if you're dealing with someone who's high neuroticism, someone who has a lot of that baggage and those previous concepts about what it's got to look like, that you can always ask the question, well, how did that work for you? How did those ideas get you to where you are, and what do we need to change? But to me, the biggest question is, the phrase is silly, what hill are you going to die on? But I think the concept is important. Is the change that I'm trying to push, is the thing that I'm trying to convince them to do, is this your goals aren't going to happen if you don't do this thing? You want to be a powerlifter and you don't want to squat? This is a non-negotiable, like, to your goal, to what you care about, what you tell me you care about. But if it's the difference between, I'm going to throw my hips in the press, or I'm going to do it strict. I'm going to do, a low bar squat to a box, or I'm not going to use a box, like, I'm going to do a low bar or a high bar, trap bar. Like, is this a 1% improvement, a 5%?
That's right.
A hypothetical difference of, and if that's the case, I can't even say with confidence to my lifter, no, you must do it this way or you're not going to meet your goals.
Yep.
And then that trust relationship is broken.
Nothing to add there, other than it's kind of interesting. I just hired Jillian to be my strength coach. She's been my nutrition coach for a while. I haven't had a strength coach in like 15 years. I'm sort of embarrassed to say it, right? Like, I'm the guy running and the reason I haven't is because I didn't think I would do what they would tell me. I know how frustrating it is to have non-compliant clients. And in building the business, I felt like I was just not going to be compliant. It was going to be frustrating for coaches to coach me. So, but Jillian and I have been talking, and she wants to be able to coach me, and I want to be able to she knows how to work with beat up guys who have been very competitive in the past. And so it's interesting because I have tremendous trust in her ability as a coach. I mean, I think she's one of the best coaches in the world. And yet, in still these first several weeks, there's still some of this sort of like getting to know each other in the strength coaching side. So even with somebody where like, I know her very well, I trust her tremendously in her knowledge and ability as a coach, there's still the building of the relationship trust in, does she know how to not hurt me in the weight room? Like, she knows how to coach almost anybody, but like, I'm really broken. So, and one of the things she's done very well is she asks questions about like, how does this exercise feel? Does anything hurt? You know, she knows I've got bad hips. Does it hurt your hips? Where does it hurt? How are, you know, you're doing LTEs. Does this bother your shoulders or your elbows at all? Like, feedback there so that she gets the feel. And by the way, that's one of the things that she can do to start to build trust with me. So I know that she's not just making me fit into a program, but that she's trying to make sure that she's meeting me where I'm at. Okay, like this exercise is off the table. This one is right. So it just shows how skilled she is as a coach as well.
I think if there was one thing I would say back to Eric now that I'm simmering on it, it's with every client, there will be a period of not trust. There will be a period of,
Yep.
and we shouldn't expect for there not to be that period. We shouldn't expect to be so famous or so trustworthy or so charismatic to ever not have to deal with that. That's just part of the game. So as long as we kind of understand that, that really changes our feelings about resistance. Resistance is building trust.
Yep.
Resistance is coming to a place of trust at the other end.
Yep. Love it. Okay. Number 4.
This comes from a Carl, not our Carl, but a Carl, on understanding your purpose. How do you know if coaching just isn't for you?
Yes, a tough question too. So there's a couple things here. One is, just because you love to lift, just because you love to train, doesn't mean that you'll be a great coach, right? You can go back to the Michael Jordan scenario. Again, famously didn't make his varsity team in high school as a sophomore in high school. And honestly, by the end of his junior year, might have been the best player in the United States in high school. He had a very high return on investment for the work he put in. And for whatever reason, Michael Jordan is also well known as a terrible coach. And so just because you love to lift, just because you love to do the thing, doesn't mean that you're going to be a great coach. Now, here's the thing. Anyone can acquire the knowledge needed to be a coach. I think the vast majority of people can learn to coach effectively under the right circumstances and with the right demographics, right? I have met people who just naturally are very socially awkward in person, but are very good online coaches, right? I have met people who are very good in-person coaches who struggle with their communication online. The communication is different, right? If I'm communicating in person in real time with someone, that is very different than asynchronous coaching via typed or recorded screen recording video feedback. And so I would say in general, if you're not wired to be a people person, if you're not wired for service, if you don't care that much about people and what you really care is about numbers and about lifting, like to me, that's a red flag. Now, could you coach just competitive powerlifters who chase numbers? Like maybe there's a niche there for you. And so I think for most people, you can find a niche but if at some point you're like, look, every single relationship that I have on a coach-client relationship comes back to question 1, it's not working out ever. You are the common denominator, right? It's not the client, it's you. It never ends well. And by the end, you start to hate it. Like, I still love coaching. I love it. Like, I love to coach. Now, listen, I don't want to coach 8 hours a day. I don't want to have 15 personal training clients like I used to at Strong Gym. That's too much time. That's too much effort. And honestly, it's a lot of dead time. That was one of the reasons I hated doing one-on-one coaching was I love the actual coaching part. I hated the 4 or 5 minutes between sets. That was the part that was like, all right, but I still love online coaching. I get up every morning. It's funny. I was thinking about this the other day. I get up every morning early and break down videos. And I still actually really enjoy doing that. And so part of it is like, does it bring you value? So coaching, when we talk about quality of life, it's a two-way street. Like, are we able to improve the quality of life of our clients? But as well, is our quality of life improved as coaches? Like, that's a big question that we have to ask. And so, if you love it, I think you need to give it enough time to see if it'll work, right? It's certainly not something that you can master in a month or 2 months or 6 months. It's going to take some time. But to me, it's less about the acquisition of skill, because the skills can almost always be acquired. And typically, if coaching isn't for someone, my experience is that it's more of a personality issue that's deeply ingrained in their personality and not in their lack of ability to acquire the skill. How do you feel about that? I'm sure you get this question a lot with the Academy.
I do. And pretty much it goes along with what you were saying. You're going to have to experiment with it. You're going to have to play with it. What I really wanted to highlight from what you said is there are different spaces within coaching. So too many people, I think they go, I don't know if coaching is for me. I'm like, well, how do you coach? Oh, well, I'm just bored off my hind in that 4 or 5 minutes between sets. Well, you don't have to do one-on-one in the gym.
That's right.
Or I want a more deep, in-person connection, and I miss like sitting in my chair for like 3 hours a day is just painful. Then get in person. There are still gyms.
That's right.
Like, even with the virus, there are still gyms. Like people still train.
Yeah.
So just going along with what you said, because that covered pretty much everything I was going to say. Consider also that maybe there's a different way of coaching.
Yes.
That may be a better fit.
Right. Or demographic or, so I had to coach for about 10 years. I was the head strength coach of a big high school, and I would have many scores of high school athletes in the weight room at the exact same time. And I was kind of trying to coach all of them at once, which is, as you might imagine, chaos. And you're trying to figure out how to get them all within 90% of correct instead of 100% of correct because there's just too many at once and not enough coaches that know what they're doing. I've done a ton of one-on-one coaching. And of course, I've probably done more online coaching than potentially anybody ever. And yet, one of my favorite things I've ever done, I actually love online coaching, is there was a time at Strong where at 5 o'clock in the morning or 5:30 in the morning, we did what we called a boot camp class, which was really sort of like at the times before we actually bought the CrossFit affiliate. So it was kind of a CrossFit kind of hybrid where we would have mostly females come in, although also business professionals come in before work. And I think it was like 5:30 to 6:30. It was like for an hour, or maybe it was 6 to 7, somewhere in there. And we would do 1 or 2 main lifts. And then we would do like 15 or 20 minutes of sort of HIIT conditioning at the end. Like everything was inside an hour. And I got to coach, 15 to 18 people at once in kind of group coaching. And it was a blast. Like that was the fastest hour of my day. I loved it. Now, for a lot of people, that's a lot of chaos and a lot to coach and would be overwhelming. And you've got to have a good eye and you got to be able to figure out, it's almost sort of, you got to figure out like, okay, you're going over here and then you go, then you go, then you go. And I'm kind of pointing, left to right as you go. But it was a lot of fun. And so just like you said, there are so many different ways and methods and styles and demographics that for most people, they can find that. Listen, I'm amazed. People joke about our community being full of people who I'm not making fun. It's actually true. People who are a little bit on the Asperger scale, the autism scale, like on the high end, on the high functioning end. And there's some social skill issues. And yet I'm amazed at how some of these people who I've met in person who are awkward socially, who work for us at Barbell Logic or have in the past, are incredibly personable online. They're able to communicate very effectively written or with screen recordings or when they're able to watch it and then think about it and then say afterwards what they want to say. And in person, it's just a little bit awkward. And so again, they've been able to find their niche and be able to do a thing that they love. And so I would look for that first. In the beginning, you're not going to know. You're just going to have to find that. Just like you're not going to know the demographic that you're going to work with. Yeah, everybody wants to work with like freaky athletes in the beginning, right? Yeah, I'd love to work with freaky because they make everybody look great. But, eventually you go like, well, what's actually really fun is completely changing the lives of people in their 40s and 50s. For me, that's what it is, right? Or in their 60s or 70s or 80s. So, okay, question from Ironbone SSF. I assume that's not the name his mom gave him, or maybe it's a she. I have no idea. On training older gentlemen, how do you best hold back the reins on older men that are more fragile than they realize?
So I'm going to throw in my piece and then I'm really interested to hear what you got on this one, Matt. So for me, there's like a tactical side and a soft side. The tactical side is, well, how much do I need to hold the reins back and how much can I build the guardrails so that they can work as hard as they want, not as hard as they want to, but they can work hard and build that work capacity over time. So, maybe they're a little bit too fragile for full depth, low bar squats at the weights that they would want to be doing, right? But maybe on a leg press, on a belt squat, on a box squat, there are other tools that I can use where I can let them work pretty hard and the margins of error for balance, and other issues just isn't there. So is there a way that I can not have to hold back the reins?
Yep.
And then the other question is that soft side, like it's that conversation, what are your goals? What's the timeline? Like, are we getting there? And that's always a conversation independent and individual to the lifter.
Yeah. I mean, man, I totally agree. Actually, I like the visual. I think about the bumpers you put up for little kids in a bowling alley, right? If you ever go to a bowling alley, you put up the bumpers so you keep them out of the gutter, but you always keep the ball going down towards the pins. I like having the conversation, which again, it takes time to build trust over the course of the first several weeks or months that you're coaching somebody. You talk to them about the goal is to slowly increase stress. If you hammer stress hard, and sometimes we'll have a client that does this online. We get this a lot because we're not in person doing it. They'll just do a whole bunch more than you actually program them for. And you're like, hey man, that's great. Let's see how Friday goes. And they hit the wall and you're like, okay, well, let's talk about why you hit the wall on Friday, right? Because the goal here is that your body, I know it felt like you weren't doing a ton of work, but you were doing more work than you had ever done before. And your body hadn't adapted to that yet. And it will. And so we can always go for broke and we can get greedy, but what's going to happen is the very next workout or a couple workouts after that, boom, we're going to bonk, right? So that's one method. But I actually tend to do more of what you said, which is I put the guardrails up and I go, look, we're going to slowly increase stress on the squat, on the deadlift, on these big main lifts. And then if there's somebody that just wants to like get their ass kicked, just kick their ass on like the prowler.
Yeah, prowler.
Things like that are, like low eccentric, low impact. It's that low skill movement, but you can just wreck them and they just want to get in there and sweat to death and like be like, I almost threw up at the end of that workout. Like that's not what I want to do, but I would much rather sort of do that with the prowler or something that again is low impact, low skill, low eccentric, not going to make them sore, not going to take away very much from the strength stuff than to go like, hey, I know you really want to do 6 sets on squats. We're only doing 3. Let's just stick with the 3 sets and then let's hammer it at the end. So that's what I tend to do. And I think we kind of keep coming back to this. You start with that. And then while you're doing that, you have an opportunity to really educate them on like why you're doing what you're doing. And so that you can make sure that the stress that you're giving them is more productive and more productive over time and not just there to just wreck them, right? There are guys that want to just be wrecked.
I mean, I'm relatively young. And so I'm working with a guy who's more than twice my age. And there's a little bit of that, like, okay, CJ, I know how my body works. Like, I know I've had a lot of years on this earth to build up self-experience. And there's a little bit of, maybe I don't want to hold back the reins as long as he's not going to get hurt. Maybe I let that go. And there is no better trust builder than being more right about their experience than they are.
Right.
Which you can only let happen if you let go of the reins and, have that space for them to play. Just like you were saying, Matt, if they beat themselves out and then on Friday they're all beat up, that's a great time to be like, hey, not an I told you so. But when you have that conversation, if you made that point earlier, there's no better trust builder to like, yeah, that's how the process works.
Yeah, agreed. Here's an easy one. Question from Matt, not Reynolds, on the Academy for CJ. How frequent is the coaching academy?
All the time. So we used to do a 6-month cohort. You would sign up, there were certain date blocks and there was a fixed instructor. It's an online learning environment now, the principles course. You can go to the website, you get it anytime. You're still part of a Slack channel that has ongoing webinars and like continuing education. But the actual, what is now the Barbell Academy is as soon as you sign up.
Which means you don't have to complete it in 6 months. You might complete it in 3 months. You might complete it in 1.5 years. You get to complete it in your own time. So if you decide to just hammer it, I don't know, how fast has somebody gone through it at this point? It was the fastest.
Fastest I've seen was like from someone who went through and did all the steps about 2.5 months.
Yeah. So you can hammer it. And, one thing that I noticed that we try not to use a lot of very special vernacular that as you're taking the quizzes for the sections, there are other certifications that I've used that if you don't know their exact vernacular, so it's not actually whether you know the material or not. It's like whether you know their special lingo, right? So it's like Starbucks. You go to Starbucks, like you can't order a large coffee. You have to order a venti coffee. Like if you don't use the word venti, they're like, whoa, what's going on with this guy? He doesn't know about Starbucks. He doesn't know how to, right? We try not to do that very much. We try to use like common vernacular. We're trying to make sure that you understand like the big picture, and especially with the principles, right? With principles is principles for a reason. So it's both a wonderful prerequisite for a coach, but it's also outstanding for the barbell enthusiast. And then you get the deep dives in advanced. And advanced, the nice thing about that is it's not a chronological model in advanced. You get to choose where you hammer first, right? So you've got these sections in advanced on anatomy and physiology. You've got sections on biomechanics and physics. You have sections on post-novice programming. You can go like, where am I most efficient? And by the way, more classes being added, every couple quarters or so to the advanced, you get to go like, where are the places that I really need to bone up and be better? And so I love that people get to work at their own pace. So that way it made it easier for us. Like, I had this class, like we've all taught the academy and I ended up teaching the academy. Like I had a guy in Belgium, he had to show up at 3 a.m. for class. Dude, that's tough. That's tough to do. And he did a great job of doing it. But like, that's tough when you do the cohort model. And so now you get to do it on your own time. One of the things that we love about online coaching is that you get to do online coaching, get to train when you want, where you want, anytime you want, with the equipment you have, right? And now on the Barbell Academy is the same way, right? Like if you've got internet access, you can do it on your own schedule, which is what's wonderful. You don't have to commit to Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time or whenever it is, which is really cool.
Yep.
All right. Question from Bravo Sierra Tango on long-legged athletes. I wanted to ask you this because you're a shorty. Best tips for training long-legged athletes to squat or pull?
Yeah. So the first thing when I looked at this and I'm like, you coach them. And to a certain extent, if you have a concept for how the model looks, you have a concept for how that's going to change how they look in the lift, you coach them. Like, so they're going to look more bent over. We just get used to that. And we know that. Now, I've worked with a few who, because they are more bent over, long femur, short torso, it is more challenging for them. And sometimes they get to the point where the shoulders are actually below the hips, particularly in the deadlift. But even in the squat, they clearly are more bent over than they need to be. So I'm spending a lot more time, maybe even using over cues, like driving the chest into the bar, something I might not say to a lot of different people, but driving the chest up, focusing on keeping the nipples pointed toward the far wall. I will even have some of my lifters, particularly in the squat, instead of coaching them to be on the midfoot, I'll tell them to think about it, and we'll do a visual demo and all that, of being slightly behind midfoot, like on the front of the heel.
Yep.
Just because it is so hard for them to find that right spot, and their margin of error is so much smaller.
Yep.
So yeah, I find myself using over cues quite a bit.
By the way, the same is exactly true with lifters that I have that are the opposite, which are extremely short femored lifters and very long torsoed lifters. So I use those over cues as well. So, but for the most part, one of the things that we love about the squat and the deadlift and the big presses is that it all sort of balances out, right? Most people aren't made to squat and pull, right? So typically, like the people that have the best leverages for squat tend to be those shorter femurs, longer torsos. And believe it or not, and most people may not understand this, but the best leverages for pulls actually are long legs and short back. And while the back is more horizontal, so there's much more percentage of moment on the back, it's such a shorter moment arm on the back, and the hip angle is so high, the fulcrum's high, further away from the barbell. So you're actually in sort of better leverage to pull a lot of times with that longer leg. And so it tends to even itself out. Again, shorter legged people, shorter appendage people tend to do better on squats and bench presses or presses. Obviously, the range of motion is shorter. But again, some of that too is you start thinking about, if you're not careful, you get into the powerlifting sort of thought process and you start thinking about moving the most weight. And a lot of times it's just like the amount of work that we have to do, like, what are you going to do? Right. And so we've got one of our favorite clients. He was at the BLOC party. He's a ex-NBA player, a good NBA player, very tall, 6'9", I think, something like that. He's tall,
Yeah.
Real tall. And I said, man, we ought to put that open barbell on him and just do like work comparison. Like, what if you did a 315 squat for a set of 5 and he did a 315 squat for a set of 5, and then we compared the work, the total work, right? So, and that's really what it's about. And what we're doing here again is we're trying to get strong for ourselves. We're trying to, for most part, like, we love competition. We love doing that. It's fun, but most of us aren't world changers. We're not setting world records. And so, you just got to do the best with what you've been given. So.
Yep. All right. I got one for you. This one's fun. Question from Nathan on charging clients. When can I honestly start to charge people for the coaching services I provide?
That's a good question. As early as possible, and when you're certain that you can actually provide value to them. So those are the two things. Here's the thing. Everybody starts coaching for free. You usually start coaching your friends and family for free, right? Whoever you coach for free, your 99.9% chance are never going to be able to charge them for coaching. I mean, that's just the way it is, right? Like, just think about, like, get out of the coaching. Like, if you've ever had a friend that sort of like always did a favor for you, here's the favor. And then after a while, like, hey man, I can't do the favor anymore. I'm going to charge you my normal rate. Also, you'd be like, is everything okay between us? Are we okay? Did something go wrong? And then they're just like, no, but I'm just like a professional at what I do now. And so, right. So yes, everybody has to coach for free. I think it is important to volunteer your time. That's where I say, like, go to high schools and boys and girls clubs and coach your parents and coach your family and coach your friends. And yeah, it's hard to coach your parents and your family. I think we got another question about that later on, about like, how do you do that and not pull your hair out? But like, the reality is, like, that's where you earn your chops, is doing that stuff. you've got to get out of your head in what you think your value is. And a lot of times it's tough because I can remember being a teacher in the Midwest, not making very much money in Springfield, Missouri. And I was charging, I think, $50 an hour for coaching, which seemed just like really expensive for me. And then I remember going to $75 an hour, and I was like embarrassed to ask for it. But I did it with confidence because I'm Reynolds and I can sell and I can put on a face. And immediately my client load doubled. It was weird. It's like the skin in the game makes people, again, I think I heard Brett Bartholomew, our buddy from the Art of Coaching, say is like, if you can get the $35 massage or the $120 massage, which one do you want? Like, I want the $120 massage. Now, there are people who want the $35 massage, but like, that's not us and that's not who we coach, right? Just like every once in a while, you want a dollar double cheeseburger, but like most of the time, I don't want dollar double cheeseburgers. I want the filet mignon. Like, that's what I'm looking for. And so people recognize that quality costs money. And when you coach them for free, they're natural. Like, there is something, it's the placebo effect in their brain that goes, well, like, this isn't really that valuable, or maybe no value, because you're charging me nothing for the thing. Now, if you have no clue how to coach, like literally no clue, right? You haven't been through the academy and you're just like really into this and you read Arnold's Encyclopedia of Modern Bodybuilding, like, you probably shouldn't be charging people. But as soon as you can bring value, then I think it's time to pull the trigger earlier rather than later.
I think we have an article on the site, How Not to Totally Suck as a Coach. And there's one thing included in there. I encourage you, Nathan, to look it up, but it has to do with resentment. There's a resentment factor that comes in because I hear, when can I honestly start to charge people? I'm like, are you dishonestly not charging people? Are you being dishonest and dishonoring your time and yourself? And are you now going to start delivering a worse service and resenting the time that you're putting in when things in your life around that coaching get a little bit busier? I encourage people, even when they start, even if you don't feel comfortable or you don't have the skill, you're not really able to offer as much value, make it explicit what the exchange is. So, hey, we're going to do a 3-month totally free. At the end of it, I'll be charging you a discounted rate because I'm relatively new, or a 6-month. I'd like to ask you for a Google business testimonial at the end of this, period, as I start to grow my coaching business. I'd like to do 15-minute feedback, sessions with you after each month, just so I could grow as a coach. Find some way to make it explicit what you're getting out of it, just so you don't resent the relationship.
Yeah, that's good. Great answer. By the way, one of the big moves we made, it's been years now, it's kind of funny, I think back as we were trying to learn about businesses, I'm sure you remember this. There used to be a time when Barbell Logic would pay their coaches a set percentage of what the client paid. And we would have clients that had been with us since the Reynolds Strong days, since the very, very early days, who were grandfathered in at this like super cheap rate. And the coach was getting paid very low rate. And then one day we realized, we're like, well, the level of coaching the client receives is the same if they signed up for professional coaching or coaching plus nutrition, whatever it is. The coaches should get paid the same. So like to this day, we've got quite a few clients that the company loses money on, and we're happy to do so, that we pay the coach the same. I don't want the coaches to provide worse service to their clients because the clients pay a little less. So we got away from that. We're like, listen, this is what you get paid for online coaching. This is what you get paid for online coaching plus nutrition or exclusive or whatever it is. And then regardless of what the client pays, right? So if they're grandfathered in because they've been with us since 2014, then the coach still gets paid what the coach is worth, not the percentage that the client's been grandfathered in at, right? Like, I would love for dude, I hope 60 years from now, we got a few clients paying $100 a month because they've been with us since 2014, right? I get it. But the coaches shouldn't be penalized that way. And so that was an important move for us to make. Okay. Question from Daryl on in-person and online coaching. He says, would you recommend an online coaching / in-person hybrid model for new coaches?
It's an interesting question. And I really like it. Working with the individual, I like to say, would I recommend it for you? I need to know you and I need to know your situation. So I will talk some pros and cons. Like, an online coaching in-person hybrid model, for those who aren't familiar with the concept, I'm going to do like intro sessions or a fundamentals or an on-ramp. You're going to learn how to do the barbell lifts. And then after that initial high cost, high touch session, you're going to do most of your work on your own with occasional in-person sessions. And then that's going to come wrapped up in a monthly rate or a monthly rate supplemented by your in-person time. That's generally what these hybrid models look like, although you can design it to look however you want. And I think there's a lot of advantage to it. So many people, once they get the technique down, they don't really need your constant attention. They don't need one-on-one, and you're not really in a position to do small group or cohort, which would be a lot more time efficient. So it's cheaper for them. You still get the hands-on technique, coaching for practice for yourself, but also making sure that they're in line. There's a lot of value to it. So for a lot of people, I think it's a model that they hadn't thought of that they should think of. But if you're not in a place where you're going to be able to do in-person coaching, if your reach in your community is not your local in-person community, you have a brand, you have an outlet, and most of your people are online, they don't live near you, there's a lot of different reasons why either in-person or online wouldn't be the thing. Not to mention your personality. Online coaching is not for everyone. Matt said it before. I've said it a million times. Online coaching and in-person coaching isn't for everybody. So trying to tell yourself, well, I have to do this hybrid thing because it's better dollar per hour, figure out how to make in-person better dollar per hour in a cohort model and something else, rather than trying to force yourself into this, new popular in the coaching business circle hybrid.
Yep. I agree.
Cool.
Good.
All right, Matt. So the next one from a Who's Your Barbell? That's Who's Your HOSIER, not Who Is Your. Who's Your Barbell on coaching as a side gig? Is coaching worthwhile as a side gig? I'm an accountant and want to do both.
Great question. Again, comes back to a previous answer. Just because you love to lift doesn't mean you're going to be a great coach, right? Lots of people think that they will be great at the technical aspect or the technician sort of work, and that is a whole different ball game. However, if you like to coach, and you probably are already coaching a family member or friend or neighbors or somebody that you know, or a handful of those people, and you love it, of course, I think it's a great side gig. I have continued to watch our coaches at Barbell Logic, all of whom have been professionals, and the vast majority have been professionals in other arenas, college professors or vice presidents of banks or whatever it is. I have watched them over time go from having coaching as a side gig to being able to quit their full-time job and just coach as their full-time job. If you love being an accountant and want to coach on the side because it's a hobby, do it. That's a great place to start, right? Here's what I wouldn't do. I wouldn't quit your accounting job off the bat, right? At some point, you'll know when you can transition over if that's something that you want to do. I certainly think that you can. Listen, the online coaching world is saturated. Everybody's an online coach. Every influencer on Instagram and YouTube is an online coach. COVID has exposed the holes in in-person coaching and the potential vulnerability of in-person coaching, that you can work your ass off to build your own business. And then through no fault of your own, your business can be shut down for periods of time. And so there are lots of potential swings there. One of the things that we've tried to do at Barbell Logic is make it so that our coaches can, not just our clients can train when they want and where they want, anytime they want, and with the equipment they have, but that the coaches can do the same thing, that they can coach when they want and where they want, and they can go on vacation to Mexico and they can go break down videos if they want to out on the beach or sitting on their deck. We have a way to have coverage for our coaches. And I have said for a long time that our coaches can make $100 an hour plus. And there were times when I would get pushback there and be like, yeah, you're just selling your company. And now it's been really cool to watch our coaches are now the ones who are starting to promote that is the norm. And that is not the norm in the industry, right? The norm in the industry is far less. And so you got to do it first because you love it. You got to do it first because you want to change people's lives. You're an accountant, which means you make pretty good money already. The average accountant makes a whole bunch more money per year than the average personal trainer. And so if you want to do this on the side, and because you're an accountant, you ought to be pretty smart with finances, then you ought to be able to figure out a way to do this and be able to make it profitable, make it enjoyable for you if that's what you love. And so I think it's a great side gig. I certainly think it's a better side gig than fantasy football or golf, right? Like I used to play golf. I haven't talked about this very much. Golf is so long. And by the way, I'm not like, if you love to play golf, that is fine. Like play golf, right? I would like golf courses to be about 4 holes long, maybe 5. 18's too many. I'm like, boy, this is a long day. And it's August, it's 97 outside, like not interested, right? So yeah, I mean, to me, there's a lot of other hobbies that you can do that are completely worthless. Lots of guys spend way too much time, I think, playing poker or fantasy football weekends with their friends. And by the way, I'm honest to God, I'm not judging any of those. but we have a no shit opportunity to change people's lives as coaches. And if you've got a passion for doing that, I think you should pursue it. I think it's worth pursuing.
The only thing I would add to that, because that was it. We did a podcast with Jesse Meekum, and he coaches 15 to 20 people in his local community and doesn't get paid for it one dime.
Right.
And I think it's important to ask, when you say, is coaching worthwhile as a side gig, what kind of worth are you trying to get out of it? Because once you involve money in the equation, you involve entanglements in the equation. So know what it is that you want to get out of the coaching experience.
Yeah.
And that podcast is a great reference to see someone who's very smart about money, very thoughtful and intentional, choose to do it, probably put in more effort than a lot of people do in their professional, work as a side hustle, coach, and yet chose not to.
By the way, he gets paid for coaching. He just doesn't get paid cash for coaching.
Yes.
He gets paid because what he wants is to build his community and his friends and his neighbors and his church group. Like, those people are important to him. And so for him to be able to invest in those relationships, that's the way he is able to be paid, quote unquote paid. He didn't need their cash, right? Like, the guy's built a massive business on how to budget your cash. Like, he's figured that part out. And so, yeah, that's a great point. It's a great point. It's not the only reason we do this. I do love to see our coaches or other coaches, doesn't just have to be at Barbell Logic, leave a job they hate to be able to pursue coaching full time, which they love. Like, that to this day still chokes me up. I'll still never forget the very first coach of ours. I won't tell the story specifically, but like how choked up I got when I got the text. Actually, I think it was over Slack. The coach said, I just put in my resignation at my position because I don't have to do this anymore. And I hate that job. And I love to coach. And thank you to Barbell Logic for being able to do this. Like, that's really, really cool.
Speaking of which, this one's from Adam about working at BLOC.
Oh, yes.
So what is the best way to earn a position at BLOC?
We talk about this a lot. I have made it easy for me for you to work at BLOC. But I've made it hard for you, not you, CJ, but I don't like doing interviews and looking at resumes. And I think you can fake that stuff. And what you can't fake is you can't fake going through the academy and earning your PBC. And so the best way to potentially work at BLOC is to become part of the BLOC community and go through the academy and earn your PBC. You have to be a PBC to be a coach at BLOC. That's a standard. Now, every PBC will not be a coach at BLOC. You still have to be a cultural fit. You've got to be a fit for the company. We've got to be able to supply and demand. We've got to be able to have the demand to be able to bring that supply to them. So those things are there, but like, that's the best way to do it. And so if I think about the vast majority of coaches, at least 50% of our coaches at this point at Barbell Logic started as clients of Barbell Logic, often online coaching clients, and then went through our academy, passed their PBC, right? And then we've got a process there where you go through the academy, you take a knowledge-based test, which is a written test. It's not a long essay test. It's definitely not a multiple choice test. It's a short answer to medium answer test that tests your knowledge. Then if you pass that, you do an oral interview. And then you have to do a platform test, which can be done all online. And from home, we've got ways to set that up. If you pass the first two, but you struggle on the platform, we have an apprenticeship program that we bring in coaches, and they are associate coaches for us. You get paid to work in our club program, and we really take you under our wing and make you an apprentice. And really, once you become an associate coach, if you don't end up becoming a full PBC and working at BLOC, then it's an on you thing. But that's the best way, is just to get into the community and join the academy and start working through that. I think about the ones who have been the most involved over the years in those places are often now members of leadership, full salaried leadership, who the cream rises to the top. In the beginning, when I first started the business, we didn't have a single employee, right? There was the owner, me, and all of the coaches who were all contractors. And over time, those coaches have decided to pursue something deeper, something better, something beyond just coaching, not because just coaching is like something negative to look at. A lot of us, we all love to coach. We all still coach. But you see a lot of the people like you who really got into the academic side. How do we help develop more coaches? And that cream rises to the top. And when you do that, then I don't have to put out like, hey, let's interview 19 people about who can be the director of the academy, because I've already seen somebody like you do the work and know how you're going to do in that position. It's made it easier for me and the leadership team, Mission Control, to make those decisions. So we've made it so that the answer is not send the resume to this email address and we'll call you and set up an interview. But we don't do that. It's get involved in the community, join the academy. And by the way, Join the Academy is not about making a bunch of money for us. That's not it at all. It's about growing the community. We need coaches. We want coaches. We want you to pass. We want to take you under our wing and help you earn this. And so that's the key to working at BLOC.
Well, you heard it from the man.
We got 3 left. Let's hammer and cook. We're getting to an hour. We'll do kind of rapid fire here. So how do I coach my parents from EHS? How do I coach my parents without my blood pressure going through the roof?
Whew. I did this myself. And, obviously we do hear this a lot, whether it's parents, family, something like that. There's a lot of relationship baggage that comes tied with that can tend to build into frustration, into resistance. What is it they say? A prophet is never believed in his home.
That's right.
That kind of feeling to it. So a lot of it is, okay, if I'm feeling that frustration, I'm having to bring something to make this resistance happen. Someone is pushing against something. So let's take a step back. What is it that I want for them? What is it that they want for themselves? And do we need to back off the intensity, back off the frequency? Do I need to take a step off the expert pedestal? Like maybe they don't do barbell bench, maybe they're intimidated by the gym. Maybe we're doing incline bench at home, on a stool, something stable enough for them to do that, something like that. Where can I find a relationship and how can I find a role in this relationship that we have that will get them what they need, that is less overwhelming? Because if I try to be a coach with my mom, like if I try to be the professional coach with, someone who wiped my butt when I was 1 year old,
it's not going to work.
Yeah, there's a lot of room for frustration.
Yeah, you just got to make it fun, man. You got to make it fun. And same with your kids and same with your spouse. It's just part of that. It's a big piece of what we're doing. Again, it comes back to quality of life. If what you're doing is shoving the medicine down your parents' throat because it's best for them, like that's not sustainable, right? So start with where they are. Meet them with where they are, build their own confidence, and let them have some fun. And over time, you'll be able to proselytize a little bit about what we do. They'll understand the value of what we're trying to do. I'm going to go to the last one and ask you this. What is the process, because I started to touch on it, for the platform assessment for the PBC? So I started to touch on it. Give me a little more detail. So if someone wants to earn their PBC, what does that process look like for them?
Sure. So whether or not you go through the academy, you can apply for your PBC. That's one question we get a lot. You can go on the website, pay for the PBC, and you'll get an email from me because I'm the written exam proctor with instructions on how to complete the written exam, how to schedule yourself for the written exam, because it is done over Zoom, and you're doing it live in a specific time block provided. Now, my purpose there isn't to watch you and be like, oh, you were cheating. It's not like we see some colleges doing that. If you were to try to cheat, you would fail. The exam takes too long for you to Wikipedia all the answers. And you could, potentially, because these are not in-house sneaky questions. Like this is physiology, anatomy, biomechanics. But if you were to try to look them all, you would fail. My purpose for being there is for you to ask, questions if there's anything unclear, if there's a glitch. So let's say you pass the exam. You'll get an email about how to schedule your interview. Do your interview. Right now, Andrew and Nikki are doing those, but that's, right now as of this podcast. And then assuming you pass that, same thing, how to submit the videos for your platform assessment. You'll be coaching a real person. You will be bringing somebody, preferably relatively novice, to take them through the teaching progressions for the 4 lifts and how you're going to execute them, take them out through a working set so we can see in real time how you coach.
Yep.
There's a, real time and separate from video. There's a problem we ran into in the seminar environment where like the coach would be trying to perform for the assessor. If I see that error, yeah, it's not high priority or it's going to confuse the lifter. But if I don't say something, then CJ, who's watching me and grading me, is going to think I didn't see it.
Right.
So you'll be able to be a coach. And then, we can have that, conversation and break that down in distance because you have that time without that, the observation. So once that's 3, assuming you've passed all 3, then you go through, you get notification, hey, you passed, you get your certificate, and you're on the website on our registry for PBCs. One thing that we do get a lot of questions about, what if I fail? Am I going to have to pay the whole fee for the whole PBC? No. We want you to, if you fail the written exam, you're going to have to retake a written exam. There's an alternate exam, multiple alternate exams potentially, and there's a retake fee just for the exam. So for the proctor's time and for the grading time to make sure that we can provide you the feedback you need to pass the next time.
Yeah. There's sections, if you pass sections of any of those, you don't have to repass the sections that you passed, right? Is that still true for the written exam? Like there's even sections on the written exam or you still get a full written exam, but it's a
So the pass or fail is based on the total score.
Okay.
But you get feedback based on sections. So if you fail the test, you're going to have to retake the test, but you will know what it is that you got wrong. And you'll know, hey, if you crushed, 3 out of 5 sections, but you were weak on programming and you were weak on biomechanics, like you're going to know. We don't want you to go blind, like, oh, sorry, you failed the test, try again.
Sure.
Good luck, like figuring out what you got wrong. No, you'll know what you got wrong so you can prepare, so you can succeed.
And we're usually there to try to help you bone up on the sections that you struggle with, right? That if you pass then the written and or pass the oral examination, then you don't have to retake those. If you fail the platform, you just have to come back and take the platform exam until you pass. And again, sometimes we see that and it's really, really close and we allow you to retest that in a short period of time. Other times we say like, you can learn all the knowledge you need to take the written test and do the oral exam in a relatively short amount of time. But the platform in-person coaching is something that can't be learned in a book, must be experienced. And so if we see somebody that just needs more experience, that would be the type of person that we would then invite. And it's an invite only into the apprentice program to have somebody come in and be an associate coach for us to earn the reps, right? Of just seeing more and more and more reps to hone their coaching eye. So yeah, we've got a great process in place. And one of the things I love about it now is that entire PBC can also be earned from your own home, from your own gym. The seminar model was tough because you take somebody out of their own home, sometimes fly literally across an ocean, multiple time zones away, put them in a strange gym, have them coach a strange person that they've never met before and perform in front of coaches in real time, right then, like high pressure situation. Like it's not very real. So now what you get to do is you get to take someone who hopefully still new and you haven't really coached before, but it's in your home gym. It's in your personal gym. It's in the place that you coach in your hometown. And it's a lot more, in fact, like what your normal coaching style should be. And then we have an opportunity, rather than giving you feedback after the fact, after watching you in real time, we would come back and say, we saw you do this, but you should have said this. And the coach would be like, I didn't even remember that I did that, or don't even believe that I did that. Now you can actually show them the video and go, look where you are, or look what you said, or see what's going on here. You can actually go back and then you can actually see yourself coach. And boy, what an eye-opening sort of piece that is as well. So the process has really been refined and super proud of it. So dude, thank you so much for all you've done so far for the Academy and for growing the knowledge in this young group of coaches. I say young, I mean younger as in their coaching status, not necessarily by age. I know we've got some people that are up there in their 60s and 70s doing this, and that's a great time to learn how to coach as well. But this has been great. I'm sure we'll do more of these. So if you have more questions, you can always reach out to CJ. His email is cgotcher, Gotcher, at barbell-logic.com, right? Gotcher at barbell-logic.com. If you have any questions about the Academy whatsoever, and then of course we have for those Academy students, anybody can be part of the Facebook group. Is that right?
That's right. The Strength Coaches Learning Corner. You can plug that into Facebook and group search and you'll find us. That's a public group.
And then if you join the Academy, you'll have access to the Academy community there on Slack. And it's an awesome community. We do webinars. You're doing them all the time. And we have them usually something almost every week at this point. Mm-hmm. So all kinds of fun discussions going on there as well. So thanks for listening to another episode of the Barbell Logic podcast, another Q&A episode, this one for the coaches. We'll see you next week on Monday. See you then.